Alongside one lifeline getting used, Ready to Love finally gives us some kind of romance instead of just unending drama. Though, it should be noted, as one dramatic storyline ends, another one might be picking up steam. So in regards to who gets eliminated in the latest episode, the bottom two for the women was Jonique and Sue-Ann, and surprisingly the bottom two for the men was Anthony and Mark Anthony. Mark Anthony's issue mostly seemed to be his age and whether or not he's ready for what these women want. And for Anthony, the issue was he's not pursuing the women as aggressively or actively as some would like, specifically Morgan and Marcia, but in the end, the women decide to use their lifeline to save both Mark Anthony and Anthony, with Mark Anthony being the one who would have got eliminated otherwise. But the men don't do the same. The men let Jonique get eliminated, and some of the women, including Jonique, are kind of mad about that since, they saved the man, but the men didn't save any women, but it is what it is at this point. And to be honest, when it came to the men, it seemed that, especially with Tony, that maybe his vote for Jonique might have been about trying to deal with Morgan increasingly wanting him to shave off his different love interests in order to help her feel more secure in what they have going on. But before we get to Morgan and the drama she brings this episode, let's get to the positive stuff. For one, Anthony, with having another week, he decides to pursue Sue-Ann of all people, and at times the date that they have at his house is a little bit rough because he isn't consistent in saying the right things to her. But overall things are good, and when they dance, she's back into that vibe that while Blake is undoubtedly her number one, she'll let Anthony be number two. Alongside her, another person who goes on multiple dates since he was in the bottom two is Mark Anthony, and his dates pretty much blow Anthony's out of the water. With Mercedes, it's pretty much fun and games. It's very cute. She's laughing and giggling and they kiss. But with Jeffrey, things get a bit more serious because she reveals that she has Crohn's disease during the date, and he says pretty much all the right things regarding how she feels, how's her children dealing with that, and even though Blue and the recently returned Andre are still very much up there when it comes to her, Mark Anthony's really making it harder for her to really narrow down who she wants, especially since with us being at the halfway point and Tommy revealing that there's going to be no more lifelines, it means decision-making time is coming up soon. Which is one of the reasons why, when it comes to Morgan and Tony, she is still very much not happy about Tony being the flirt that he is. She is pretty much secure of her choice right now in terms of Tony, but at the same time, she knows that bringing up Lyndon, making it clear that she doesn't like that he's dating around, even though technically she's dating around, is much of an issue. And Tony not being committal is also a problem, but let's be real. At this point, it seems when it comes to Morgan and Tony, Morgan's not really for the process and how it plays out. And Tony is definitely someone who, he may really be into Morgan, but increasingly the way he talks about the relationship is more so him trying to make sure that Lyndon doesn't get her, because then that might be embarrassing to him, more than like he's really trying to build something with her. So let's get to some of the drama. The lighter stuff deals with the fact that Andre is very hurt by Mercedes not checking in on him while he was away, and she pretty much shrugs it off and is very to the point about, you wasn't here. Mark Anthony was, so out of sight, out of mind. I focus on the person who was still part of the process. And this hurts the man's feelings a bit, but it also allows him to see her as she wished to be seen. So with that, he backs off and even puts her in his bottom two and makes it clear in the lounge deliberation section of the show. Now, switching over to Anthony, as we noted earlier, he had a bit of an issue with Marcia and Morgan in terms of him not pursuing and being a little bit too chill, but that's light work compared to Morgan deciding to actually go on a one-on-one date, for lack of a better way to put it, with Blake of all people. Now, when she's on this date with Blake, it's very clear that it's not about reconciliation. It's not even very much about an apology. It's about her getting some feelings off her chest, and maybe there was a possibility that if Blake said the right thing, they could have at least been cordial. But with him apologizing and not really knowing what he's apologizing for, with him doubling down on what he said before, at this point, he's persona non grata when it comes to Morgan, and she hates his guts. And if she wasn't trying to get him off the show with some type of intention before, now that's going to be one of her top priorities. So when it comes to highlights for this episode, definitely it's just the scenes between Mark Anthony with Mercedes and Jeffrey, and even Anthony and Sue-Ann, because too much of this show thus far seemed to have been about whatever Blake drama was going on, featuring a little bit of romance, whether it was Cynthia with somebody, or maybe even Jeffrey every now and then having a nice moment. But now it seems that Ready to Love wants to really claim being a dating show rather than a competition. And with that, you finally get that sense that you can really be of a certain age, have children, be of course a black person, and find black love. Which, as we've seen thus far, has not been something this show has always been that invested in. But with that said, on the fence topic is definitely Morgan. Now, in a previous recap, we mentioned that Morgan kind of gives us a little iffy feelings because of the way that she was dangling Lyndon in front of Tony. And I think things haven't really changed much. If anything, she's starting to build an arc where she's no longer past the Morgan who's, this good girl who for some reason didn't experience love in her life. Now, slowly but surely, you're starting to understand, oh, this is how you might actually be, huh? And maybe the reason why Blake gets on your nerves and kind of does something to you is because a part of interacting and looking at him kind of makes you look in the mirror and realize he's somebody who gets to be that butthead that you can't be, and that kind of frustrates you. At least if you want to go too far, that could potentially be seen, but I think the minimum that you have to admit is that she's definitely a little bit insecure. And I think when it comes to Tony, the way she talks about him, the way she interacts with him, it seems more of an infatuation thing than love. But again, we don't know much about her past relationships, so even though the whole let's meet the exes thing has really been an odd episode theme when it comes to the show, I admit now I'm very interested to see who exactly is Morgan's ex so that we can get a vibe of who she is beyond the facade that is slowly but surely starting to deteriorate. So in terms of who's up for elimination next, I am 100% sure that Morgan's going to make it her business to get Blake out, and being that only Sue-Ann is probably willing to advocate for Blake, maybe Cynthia, maybe Mercedes too, he's gonna be in a struggle and probably end up right back in the bottom two. And honestly, I think Anthony's gonna rejoin him because while he's shown improvement with Sue-Ann, I don't think that Sue-Ann has the same expectations as you may see from Morgan or even Marcia. So Anthony would have to come much harder than he did with Sue-Ann. If he, out of context, that can sound terrible. Anyway, he's going to have to do much better with those two if he expects anything to happen. In terms of women and who might get eliminated next on the show, it's between Marcia and I think Sue-Ann's going to end up in the bottom two again. But I will say, if Sue-Ann gets eliminated, I am 100% sure that Blake is going to self-eliminate and probably make up for Andre messing with the quota of someone each season self-eliminating. Now, as for why these two would be in the bottom, I still feel that even though Marcia now apparently is of interest to Blue, even though she doesn't like fishing and all that, she still got that homie vibe label early on, and I don't think she really got past it. And yes, she's number two for Tony, but I feel like with Tony, I don't want to say he's playing games, because a part of me doesn't feel that way, but at the same time, we've always seen somebody with this show who had ulterior motives, and while we don't see a certain part of them during the show, then something comes on a reunion show that reveals who they truly are, and he may be that guy, because this show's going on for I think 8 seasons, or at least 8 cast seasons at this point, so patterns unforming. And while they may try to change some things up in terms of, what kind of themes they do, like having this open forum things, people are getting cast the same just about every year, and it's possible that Tony could be one of those guys who you gotta raise the eyebrow at. But we're not talking about issues that coming down the line. We're talking about who's going to get eliminated next. And alongside Marcia, I think Sue-Ann is a definite because none of the guys are interested in her. I mean, Anthony is, but I feel like at this point, Anthony's kind of like drowning because with Andre's return, Cynthia, I don't think he has much of a chance. But with Sue-Ann, she is so locked in with Blake that Anthony's a nice option, but it's not like Blake has other people he can talk to on this show, so why even pretend like you need to date other people, especially considering how most haven't made that much effort compared to Blake, so why would she waste the time and not just eliminate this guy and keep it pushing? Now, as for who's going to be part of the final couples, that's a bit harder to say since we finally got an episode featuring people being romantic with one another. Sue-Ann and Blake, I'm pretty sure, even if they don't make it to the final three, at the very least they'll make it to the reunion show. Mark Anthony, based off of his dates with Jeffrey and also with Mercedes, has a very good chance of making it to the end. I would like Cynthia to make it to the end with Andre, but with us getting to the point where they're going to be meeting each other's families, friends, doing a getaway, that's going to be a real test for those two, especially when things aren't as fun anymore and they're starting to get to that point where things are appearing serious. And as for Morgan and Tony, I feel like they can make it to the end of this season, but once the reunion show hits, something's going to come up that has them breaking up. I don't know what exactly, but like Morgan, I feel like Tony's on this arc where he's going to start revealing more and more of himself that makes it so that he's less so someone you want to root for an endgame relationship and more just so somebody's going to be part of the competition or reality TV aspect that keeps the show entertaining.